Mondstadt: Lore and Stories, Volume 1, The Mondstadt Tower. In the time of the aristocrats, there stood a high tower in Mondstadt's plaza. It was on, it was built to honor Barbados, the animal archon in name, yet in reality it was nothing more than a flamboyant display of wealth and power by the royals to gloat over the commoners. The one time in the year that the commoners living in these dark times could find a little solace was during Ludi Harpastum. During one Ludi Harpastum, a wandering singer from a distant land arrived in the city. The name of the lass was Inez, and everyone at the festival was enchanted by her stunning beauty. People of all ages and all walks of life vied to catch a glimpse of her throwing the harpastum and to hear her sing foreign ballads. The blessings of Barbados are for everyone. You are only sinful if you are bitter at such a joyous occasion. As she sang these verses, she handed out her earnings during the festival to the poor and the orphans of the city. A frail figure stood among the crowds. He was the seneschal, and he fell for her at first sight, but his religious piety filled him with a frustration at his inability to suppress the emotions he was experiencing, and her acts of charity, which violated the Church's right to aid the poor, irked him all the more. As it is known to all, the beliefs of contemporary Mondstadters hold that the animal archon, Barbados, encourages people to seek love and pursue freedom, but in the Dark Ages the animal archon slept, and the city was tormented by the tyranny of the nobles, the poverty of the commoners, and the ravage of the dragon. Meanwhile, the self-proclaimed Orthodox Church, a mere figurehead controlled by the ruling class, advocated abstinence from earthly pleasures to avert divine punishment. Under such circumstances, even the harp, which symbolized the wind, had been restricted to playing only those songs deemed holy. However, the notion of divine punishment was little more than an excuse fabricated by the nobles to conceal their avarice and restrict the commoners. To let her stay in the city was to bewitch all its inhabitants. What wickedness will this witch bring? The seneschal pondered. And so the seneschal plotted to hunt down Inez, and to confine her to the cathedral while awaiting further instructions. As per the traditions of the time, the maiden chosen to throw the harpastum should serve at the royal court for 3 days after the celebration, under the protection of the aristocrats. The seneschal decided to send his adopted son, Octave, to sneak into the royal court and abduct Inez. Octave was an unwelcome child, abandoned by his superstitious parents at birth and later raised by the seneschal. As a child he was persecuted and abused by the citizens, seen as a bad omen of draconic disasters. The only person who protected Octave was the seneschal, who treated him like his own son and thus won his utmost trust. Bring the maiden who threw the harpastum yesterday to me. Disturb no one, and do not mention my name. Under orders from the seneschal, Octave climbed onto the balcony of the court chambers at nightfall. Upon seeing the girl weeping in the moonlight, his pure heart was stirred, for he had never seen such a wondrous sight. He gazed at the girl, leaving his task forgotten. But the silence of the tranquil moment shared by Octave and the girl was interrupted by the servants. The Legend of Vanessa, Volume 1. Friends of Mondstadt, let us revel. Drink to your heart's content, to freedom, to the animal archon, to Vanessa, the first knight to grace this world. Sons and daughters of Mondstadt, may the gift from the animal archon be engraved in your hearts. And let it be known that this gift is not freedom but just defiance. It transpired in ages past. Friends, do not excuse me for improvising, for it should be clear as day that the glory and freedom of Mondstadt were born when Barbados struck the strings dolce. Poems sing of heroic fame, yet to commemorate unnamed freedom should they aim. Chained by the royals, Mondstadt could barely aspire, and festivities were but vanity games of the rich, beyond the grasp of ordinary people. A withering dungeon Mondstadt was. In slavery games the royals gaily relished, oblivious to their place the inmates were. A fiery-headed dame confined to a cell, in the southern plains she did hail, born free but now bound by chains. Though restrained by a tyrant, her flesh remained. Still her pious soul never ceased to pray for her people, for Mondstadt, for elusive freedom if she may. Friends of Mondstadt, let us revel, drink to your heart's content. The day came when Barbados answered her devotion. The animal archon sought her fiery hair, and descended to her position. Every being deserves a name, the spirit grinned. To weave your fair name into a song I yearn. I seek nothing but your friendship in return. The girl happily reciprocated, her fears swiftly dissipated, and so the battlefield she marched to Barbados' singing voice. The demonic dragon fled from her might, and the people did rejoice. Corpulent aristocrats crawled under tables at such a valiant sight. Mondstadt is freedom, the winds sang for their people in delight. Lonely forest breezes converged, jointly they overthrew the tyrant's tower from the sky. Broken free from the shackles at last, the young lioness stood firm in the winds with her head held high. And so the fiery-headed dame won herself a prestigious fame. Her heart swelled with appreciation to sing by the animal archon's side. But no words of gratitude should she utter, Barbados replied. You first conducted what now transpires in your song. You have entrusted me with your friendship and your name. To praise your freedom my songs came. Friends, let us drink some more, for thence flows the freedom of Mondstadt. When days became nights and places filled with despair, never forget the heroic tales of Vanessa, the dame with the flaming hair. Never cease to pursue freedom, even when the land is bare. Hilichurl Cultural Customs, Volume 1. It contains the investigations and observations into the cultural customs of the Hilichurls by the Poet Laureate of Hilichurlian, Jacob Musk, a Mondstadt ecologist. This volume features the social structure and the characteristics of the Hilichurls. Volume 2. It contains the investigations and observations into the cultural customs of the Hilichurls by the Poet Laureate of Hilichurlian, Jacob Musk, a Mondstadt ecologist. This volume features the beliefs and spiritual world of the Hilichurls. Volume 3. The Mysterious Loners. Among the Hilichurls exists a kind of mysterious large creature possessing both immense physical strength and the ability to control the elements. They use this elemental ability to further enhance their physical state, such as to protect themselves or increase the brute force of their attacks, a combination making them nearly unstoppable. These powerful Hilichurls are called Lawa by the rest of the tribe, a respectful form of address that, best translated, means king or chief. However, Lawa don't actually rule over or lead the tribe at all. Rather, these large loners prefer solitude, avoiding the looks of reverence from the smaller Hilichurls. Adventurers rarely encounter these gigantic creatures. Still, even the most seasoned adventurers will think twice before going on an expedition into areas where these dangerous Lawas may be roaming. Volume 4. It contains the investigations and observations into the cultural customs of the Hilichurls by the Poet Laureate of Hilichurlian, Jacob Musk, a Mondstadt ecologist. This volume explores the diverse cultural customs of the Hilichurls in relation to Mondstadt's Heart of Clear Springs, Volume 1, a legendary tale passed down by Springvale hunters that portrays an encounter between an unknown young boy The Spring Fairy, Volume 2. As he gazed at the fractured image of the moon carried by the water's ripples, the boy poured his heart out into the spring. From within his words she learned much of him, and from her silence he strengthened himself, his belief in himself. Dimly, the Spring Fairy understood that there was good in the world beyond moonlight and fruits, and more darkness than mere clouds. The boy spoke to her of forests and trees, and cities and wealth and walls, and shared with her his joys and his sorrows and his fears. As she listened to him, she became enamored of his imperfect world into which she had been born. When the boy grew frustrated at his powerlessness, the Spring Fairy would gently and quietly wipe away his tears. From them she grew to understand the world outside the spring a little more. Those tears flowed into the water, and the fairy purified them, turning them into a sweet nectar that brought him sweet dreams. The boy forgot the pain of his waking hours, and met the silent fairy by her spring in his sleep. Every time that happened, the fairy too would smile, asleep in the pool drenched in moonlight. The fresh dew nourished the boy's dreams, and the boy's dreams rejuvenated the lonely fairy's soul. In those dreams, the Spring Fairy told the boy tales of the faraway realm of Hydro. She spoke of her sapphire blue homeland. She sang of the homesickness of exile, and she sighed for the separation and belonging. In these dreams, the boy became the one who silently listened, who wept for her troubles, and who rejoiced in her happiness. Over time, the Spring Fairy gained the power of speech from the boy's memories and dreams. Over time, they became friends who shared all. When the wind ceased to blow, the moon's fractured reflection in the pool was made whole, and the boy heard the fairy's voice for the first time. Fairies are tender, sensitive beings beyond the ken of humans, and the boy was deeply taken by her gentle, elegant voice. But fairies, being tender and sensitive beyond human ken, through his eyes she saw his naked yearning, and the promise that was about to leave his lips, and suddenly the fairy was afraid. Mortal lives are strong but fleeting, and the boy must grow, and grow old. Once youth and innocence have faded, how would he treat his elemental descendants? In the twilight of his life, would he blame himself for throwing his life away for a childish promise? The Spring Fairy was pure and kind, but she did not understand human love. She had never seen the miracle of humanity, and had merely sat idle through millennia of change, and so she greatly feared parting. What humans see as the miracle of devotion, elemental fairies can only perceive as fleeting pleasure, and even the power of fairies cannot reverse the aging of a loved one. The tender fairy could not bear to see that unavoidable day come, and with a kiss she stopped the boy from uttering the words. But the boy, in his innocence, mistook her rejection as her approval of his promise. From that moment the fairy vowed that she would some day bear to leave him, and the boy vowed that he would remain by her spring forever. A legendary tale passed down by Springvale hunters that recounts a bitter ending finally faced by a boy who was no longer young, and a spring fairy who had not grown old. Breeze Amidst the Forest, Volume 1, a collection of Mondstadt ballads recorded, compiled, and arranged by scholars centuries ago. Volume 2, The Dragon, an excerpt from an investigation into the cultural customs of the Wind Kingdom, more commonly known as Records of Customs and Culture by Jacob Musk. The wolf, the knight of Boreas, the lion of the Lion Fang Night, or Dandelion Night, the falcon of the Knights of Favonius, and the wind dragon Dvalin have been long regarded as the four winds that watch over Mondstadt. After the Lion Fang Night liberated Mondstadt, the Knights of Favonius was established, and the Knights of Boreas joined them. The tradition of worshipping the four winds was gradually formed in Mondstadt. However, Dvalin, the ancient wind dragon, predated them all. Approximately 100 years ago, the land was in chaos. Darkness spread, contaminating everything it touched. Barbarians and foul creatures roamed the lands. forcing people to dwell in the city walls. It was an especially difficult time for Mondstadt. The Lion-Fang Knight was without a suitable heir, and the Knights of Avonius had lost many of its brave men and women during the bitter wars. During the most difficult of times, Durin, the corrupted dragon of immeasurable power, began attacking Mondstadt. The prayers of Mondstadt's people awoke the animal Archon, and his will summoned forth the wind dragon Dvalin. As the last defender of Mondstadt, Dvalin battled Durin with all his might. The result was clear. Durin's remains still lie atop the snowy peaks to the south of Mondstadt, but the story of how the battle ended was lost in time. It is said that Dvalin ripped out Durin's throat, and together they fell from the sky. Durin's body sunk into the snow while Dvalin was summoned by the animal Archon and fell into a slumber. People used to believe that Dvalin would awaken whenever Mondstadt faces a new threat, but in these times of peace, the belief of the Four Winds has gradually eroded, and their temples lie all but completely deserted. Citation of unknown origin. By the time the Knights finally discovered that the foreign monstrosity named Storm Terror, with which they had clashed countless times, was in fact Dvalin of the Four Winds, the enmity that had grown between them and driven them to conflict would not be undone. One can scarcely imagine what the betrayal Dvalin must have felt when he awoke after 100 years of slumber, only to find that the people of Mondstadt, whom he protected with his life, had forsaken him. Vera's Melancholy, Volume 1. I don't ever think that the world is monotonous. It's just that interesting things happen in faraway galaxies. The great adventure of Vera, an ordinary girl always fascinated by distant lands, secretly begins. Volume 2. Everything's just boring, everything, all the time. It's not depression. It's just reaching the age of 14. So begins Vera's adventure. Volume 3. The Andromeda Empire stretches across half the galaxy grid. Every planet within the empire has its own demons and deities, dragons and monsters. I've come up with a story for every star for your home. That's not possible. Looking from here, the Andromeda galaxy is only 1/5 the size of your moon. So continues Vera's adventure. Volume 4. There's a saying that goes as follows. Not all that glitters is gold. Sometimes it is the outpouring of a broken heart. Either way, the stars in the sky certainly aren't made of gold, and most people's hearts aren't made of glass. In any case, here is the next chapter of Vera's adventures. Volume 5. You can't have picnics on the sides of a galactic highway. Even the deities will be held fully responsible for the road accidents that might occur. The doorway to a study in a simple village connects to anywhere in space and time. Having tea with the deities, playing hide-and-seek across time, Vera's great adventure continues. Volume 6. For every season. Though those things had indeed happened, they were occurrences on a galactic scale. Now something more mundane was about to happen. The date of the town festival was drawing near. I suppose it's finally my turn to introduce you to this small town then, Vera said as she served the princess and eyed her very own braised dishes. After all, those things they encountered in their galactic escapades had yet to be explained by the princess and Ike. If there was any knowledge Vera had to present to them, it was the knowledge of her hometown. Afterward, the great king's first messenger, the brave knight Huffman, strode west across 2 continents, crossing great oceans and rivers. As for the imperial sage, the witch from the east, she passed by her hometown on her road eastward, and then came by the land of Nether. Thus they finally met here. Is that so? How interesting. Though she was trying hard not to let Vera notice that she did not in fact care for the story at all, the princess's acting skills required some work, so that can only mean that this place is on the polar opposite side of this world from the great king's capital, right? Ike said, commenting on a seemingly unimportant aspect of the tale. Aha, that's true if you think about it, Vera rubbed the back of her head with a crooked smile. I've always said I want to leave this place, but in the end I discovered that this is the place I'm most familiar with. Having come to this realization on the eve of the town's anniversary, Vera began crying right in front of the Sachi's eyes. "You numbskull, you made Vera cry!" The princess made her entry with a flying kick, sending Sachi hurtling away. Volume 7. In the star clusters at the outer reaches of the universe, habitable planets are few and far between. For this reason, the region is a playground of space captains and pirates alone. With this being the universe, though, there is no port and starboard in the traditional sense. Out here, starboard means whichever side of your spacecraft is oriented towards the star you are using for navigation. Lose yourself, and especially your sense of direction, in this next chapter of Vera's Starbound Voyage. Volume 8. Of course, boys aren't invited to the girls' slumber party. Girls are sacrosanct like the gods of the Golden Age. Vera, the Princess Saint King Lebanon, and Or, alpha female of the galactic swarm, shall talk deep into the night. Volume 9. Vera is so beautiful, like a shining star in the universe. But boys at this age are always more petite than girls of similar age. Childhood must be let go of to welcome the coming of the adolescent years. It's not too late to think about it now. Real melancholy finally hits Vera. Volume 10. Vera's Melancholy. To revive Vera, Sachi, Ike, and the princess embarked on a spectacular and thrilling journey that lasted 20 years, from battling Signor Inferno to slaying the Star Devourer. The trio had even rescued 2 galaxies in the Galaxy Empire and eliminated 4 species of ruthless interstellar worms along the way. When Vera opened her eyes, she found herself in the arms of Sachi, now a hero of cosmic proportions. To the dominant species of Andromeda, 20 years was nothing more than a few seconds. The princess looked lovely as always, but her countenance was a curious mix of genuine happiness and loss. Sachi, having lost an eye in his adventures, was now a tall and strapping young man. His flowing tears soaked into Vera's shoulders. Though still prone to tears, he was no longer his feeble-minded self. The years had been kind to Ike, who, after all this time, still had that same old smile on his face. "I am but an echo of time," Ike said, as he began his preparations. "As I've said, the past cannot change the future, but the predetermined rules of equilibrium are slightly more powerful than me. But the future with its infinite possibilities could save the world." Ike transformed Sachi back into who he was 20 years ago, and time reversed itself to the day of their departure. Everything seemed to remain unchanged between the 4, though they realized that the innocence they had once shared was one thing that could never return. "I am sorry for depriving you of your childhood," Ike said to him. "Now go. The youth that you deserve awaits. I have witnessed every wonder in the universe for your sake." And this was how my childhood ended. Sachi summoned every last ounce of his courage as he stood before the girl of his destiny. "I will never reach my youth without you by my side." What will her answer be? Editor's note: the author of Vera's Melancholy is now off living the high life with the royalties from the first 9 volumes. If you happen to see him in your corner of the universe, please help us to impress upon him the urgency with which we require the next volume. Heart's Desire, Volume 1, Moonlight. Legend tells of the corner of the city that has been forgotten by the wind. To reach that place, one must stand before the fountain and close their eyes, then wait for 35 heartbeats, then walk 7 circles clockwise round the fountain, followed by 7 further circles anti-clockwise. Upon opening one's eyes, one will find they have arrived at a little shop. "Excuse me, is anyone here?" Vega asked timidly as she stepped through the door. As the door closed behind her, the bell that hung from it rang out, its crisp and clear sound filling the room and cutting through the dimly lit drudgery. The dull glow of twilight seeped gently through the frosted glass of the display case windows. Stacks of curious objects filled every part of the room. Vega made her way through the store cautiously, for fear of stepping on something and breaking it. There was no answer. Vega now began to examine the objects around her more closely. An obscure mechanical component, an ornate ancient lyre, a broken ceramic tile engraved with incomprehensible markings, a pair of old mantles, dented and scratched from years of use, a forgotten crown that once belonged to an aristocrat. At some point she was inspecting these objects of no apparent utility. The shopkeeper appeared beside her. The shopkeeper's eyes were like those of a fox, with long, slender pupils at their center. That thing once belonged to a wolf king. Aside from the gods, it is probably the only thing left that remembers the land the way it used to be, every inch of it covered in ice and snow. She spoke softly. "Welcome to the store. Do you see anything that takes your fancy? Do you have anything here that can help someone to forget?" "Why, certainly." Vega clutched her chest as she pursued the question further. "To forget anything? Even someone very important?" The fox-eyed shopkeeper's expression turned stern, and she nodded as she continued. "I know that the one you wish to forget is a young man with limpid eyes as clear as moonlight. He disappeared a long time ago and left a deep hole in your heart. Nothing else can fill that hole. All other blessings, no matter how joyful they may be, feel elusive and out of your reach, just like the moonlight before your eyes." Vega was stunned into silence. All she could do was nod along. The fox-eyed shopkeeper smiled and seemingly out of nowhere presented a bottle of wine. "This wine will help you to forget your pain. Long ago, in the age when the icy winds blew, our forebears brewed this wine in secret, deep within the frozen earth, to give them the strength to keep surviving. The method they used to brew this kind of wine was forgotten when the people's fate took a turn for the better, and their lives became more joyful." She tilted the wine bottle back and forth. "There is not much left. And since it seems you have an affinity with this store, this one is for free, provided, of course, that this is really what you want." Vega took the goblet of wine from the fox-eyed shopkeeper's hand. The goblet must once have been adorned with a precious gemstone, but it had since been removed, and now the only clue to its existence was the empty, lonely indentation it had left behind.